So, welcome back. And as you probably see in my other video, I was talking about mimicry. I think that was a few days ago, depending on when I post this one. So, the thing I'd like to talk about today is how shadow work can actually be found in pretty much everywhere in astrology. First of all, I want to say, well, one, what is shadow work? Shadow work is embracing. Shadow work is going through the process of getting back to your own childlikeness. That's the gist of it. And what does that mean? Because when you were children, we grow up, and then when you're a child and you're a baby, kind of, you're taken care of, but at the same time, because of the evolution of humans to have developed the ego, it's or the attachment to things, really. Many of us have had this unhealthy ego where, because the ego is a fearful part of the consciousness, part of our process. It is part of our conscious, but rather the unconscious part. And the ego always wants to protect itself. The ego is afraid of death. The ego is afraid of losing itself. It's identity. Something to do with, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to go into the etymology of it, but anyways, so it is attachment to form, attachment to this world, it's attachment to many, many, many things. It doesn't have to be this world, it could be another world, it could be a different dimension. It doesn't matter. The ego is a part of the identity, or part of the conscious that is not only unconscious, but is, because it stems from that fear. And if there's defense mechanism and fear, they're kind of put together, they work together, and they kind of prevent things from going further, right? This is why one of the most simple things about shadow is the simple, one of the easiest, most common, maybe more common representations of the ego, specifically the shadow, actually, but ego and shadow actually is Saturn in your chart. So, but shadow work is really, it's not about the method. Keep in mind, it's not about the method, it's not about methodology, it's not about the tool. The tool is to be used. Let's not go under the tool. Let's rise above it, and let's see that it's a tool, right? But to be dependent on the tool means that we are giving away our power. We're becoming disempowered. So we don't want that, right? Astrology is a tool, just like the ego is a tool. Everything that we experience, and everything that the universe itself, the body is a tool. This is a tool for the universe to learn more about itself, and it makes perfect sense now. And sometimes we don't get it. That's totally fine. So the shadow work is this process of the things that we work on to go back to that childlikeness. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, if you've seen, I'll grab it here. This is where I learned my shadow work from. Dark Side of the Light Chasers. I highly recommend this book. It's really good because it helps you go through your embracing your shadow, embracing your dark side, embracing your wholeness. Really, it's about becoming whole, and into becoming more comfortable with yourself, more and more and more and more. But one of the simple things that I do is to go back to that, is embracing and becoming more whole, is to find the gifts pretty much in anything. Specifically anything that we project. There's a reason why for a long time we have this thing where you have the finger, you point one finger and three point back at you, right? So shadow work is by embracing what we project, whether it's positive or negative. Meaning, if it's negative, it means that's the common one. That's the one that most people project. It's like, oh, he's such an asshole. He's fucking stupid. He's swearing. He's so gay. He's like so quiet. He's so loud. You embrace that, what you project. Or the other way, it's like when we look at positive, things that we admire in others. Maybe more than that. It's not admiration. It's more like, it's worship. It's idolization. So when we idolize someone, it's like, oh, they're so good looking. You don't embrace that of yourself. You don't embrace the gifts behind that and the gifts of it as well. So I'll give you an example. Is like when when we get attached to someone who's very smart, or someone who's intellectual, or someone who's like good looking, even if whether or not you're attracted to them doesn't matter. The point is, you're admiring, you're idolizing them, because it's like there's a part of you that goes, I don't think I have that. So it's a feeling of lack. And where does lack come from? It's the belief that you don't have it. It's a belief that I just don't have it, because when in the subconscious, when it was lodged in, when it was growing up, it's a part of the traumatic experience as well. People don't think it's trauma, but actually it is, because trauma is a shock. And when you're a child, when you go through these things, when you go through people telling you what to do, people telling you how to feel, how to love, how to eat, where, when, how, what, all of it. It creates limitations. So therefore, when you have a limit, all these things that you already had when you're physically born, at least, because it's put into this body, it's becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So therefore, you believe you're smaller, right? And it kind of reminds me of the things that something that came in just now, is that there's a reason why we are in the third dimension. There's a reason why we have the body, is because Saturn rules matter, and this ties into astrology as well, because it's representing that. Saturn also rules, I believe, the creation of matter, being born as well, which is funny, because it's like how does that tie in? Because it's like, wasn't Saturn imposing limits? I'm like, well, yeah, but at the same time, when you impose limits, when you end things, when you go like this, something else has to give, right? It has to be reborn. And so I believe Saturn also rules reincarnation. Saturn rules incarnation, reincarnation, all those things, because you're putting it into matter, right? So that means that there's a reason why the universe chooses to go into this form, is because with the evolution of form, when you have ego, and this doesn't just apply to humans, this applies to everything that develops an ego, an identity of itself, an attachment, that it's like, this is what I am, this is my thing, this book is who I am, this shirt is who I am, this face is who I am, this body is who I am, this idea is who I am, this belief is who I am, this religion is who I am, this sexuality is who I am, this darkness is who I am. That's all attachment. So when we're born into this body, when we're born into this form, it makes sense now that the reason why we're in here in the first place is because we need to learn through the limits in the first place. I believe that's the other purpose of the ego, to help us realize that it's like, when you have form, therefore when you have limits, you can go outside that limits, right? There's that. It's very, very much tied into that phrase, or that saying that we have. What are rules are meant to be broken. That's exactly what it is. The rules that are meant to be broken, meaning the limitations that are meant to be released, but they keep happening because that's the duality. It's a duality thing, right? Limits, liberation, death, life, right? Constriction, freedom, whatever. The point is, it's not about the words. The point is, it's about the process. So going back into the shadow, there are, what I realized, it came to me today in the shower, the cold shower, wonderful, was when we're how do you say this one? When we're doing shadow work, or when we're in the process of shadow work, there is it's based off of, I took notes on this one. Okay, I did not write it down. Did I? Okay. Okay. So when we're doing shadow work, it's something to do with, when we're doing shadow work, we're back into that childlikeness, right? We're trying to release and kind of get back into, there's an analogy here in the book that there's like the castle or something like that. As we get older, and we're being told what to do. We're given restrictions, or at least we give over that power. We disempower ourselves by making unconscious choices to say, okay, well, I accept what they say. And then, okay, so then that's probably me then. Then I shouldn't do that because that's what everybody says, right? And this is why it's funny because this is why Saturn rules the 10th house. 10th house is about reputation, the public. It's a public opinion about yourself, how people see you. So that when you succumb to that, it's almost like, I have to maintain this facade. I have to create this boundary. Facade, boundary, limits, same thing. Same energy, right? So when we do shadow work, we're trying to release all that and release the confines of the egoic tendencies, the confines of egoic restrictions and limitations and self-impose. It's nothing to do with what others tell us. It's what we tell ourselves. But, as children, we don't really know what's going on, especially because we're confined. There's the other limitations there. But that's a process of the whole thing, which actually ties back into the video I made before where I was talking about mimicry. Mimicry in a way is tied into when we're just told what to do. We're mimicking what others are telling us. We're mimicking ideas of the world. We're mimicking their beliefs or ideas and beliefs and all those things, limiting beliefs and everything else that are passed down from generation to generation to generation. Whether it's a guide, a guardian or guide or a parent or a foster parent, doesn't matter. Someone older than you, someone who's telling you, even a friend who tells you something, that can also be the same thing. But there's a gift behind the mimicry itself, right? Because mimicry means that you may get from what they're saying, you may kind of absorb what they're saying and kind of believe it yourself. But in that in itself is something you can learn from as well. Because it's like, what else is mimicry supposed to show you? To show you that sometimes it's not okay to copy. It's to try to be a little bit more innovative. And what is innovation? What is creativity? It's creating out of something else. It's reforming if you need to reform. Change it, right? Right? Like I mentioned in the other video, everything is a mimicry. Everything is mimicked. Everything is a copy. The only real original, so to speak, is the idea that when you have creation, the source of everything is source. That's why it tied into the word original, creative, original, authentic, is the ability itself to manifest, to make conscious, to go, okay. But it comes in different forms. That's where the uniqueness comes through. And the uniqueness is really what we see as a difference. Really, it's not really different. It's just like, it just looks different. But if you look at like every cell, it looks shaped differently. If you look at every type of finger and hand, every nail you have, they're shaped differently. It's slightly different. But its source, the intelligence behind it is where true creativity lies. And that's when we're all creative. And that's where real creation comes from. Because it's getting in touch with that intelligence and trusting it that it has its own process. This is why I find that shadow work ties in definitely with being present. Because being present has a lot to do with coming back to, it is stillness. And then when inspiration comes through, when inspiration comes through, then it's like, okay. So this is why when I make these videos, you notice it, it's the energy. If you sense the energy, it's like, it's coming out. And it's this thing that just needs to be released. And it's that creative, it's spark. It's like, it's represented by the fire. But anyway, but at the same time, not in a way, at the same time, fire is also that same thing. It's the element that represents starting points, all these things. So going back to the whole shadow work thing, where when we look at shadow work, and we're trying to get into shadow work, because you want to heal, right? One of the tools that I've come across is from the book specifically, is not only finding the gifts and everything, but kind of like you putting into practice. But there's two sides to this one. This is the one I wanted to mention. One is there's a difference between I guess you could call it difference, but there's a kind of a connection, but also a difference between putting into practice and talking about it, kind of like what they do in typical psychological, like, you know, therapy and all that stuff. They get you to talk about it. But what happens is that there's that part, but on its own, alone, on its own, doesn't work. You need to dislodge trauma. You need to dislodge those old beliefs through the body. That's why it's good to have like an active lifestyle, even if you're just walking. This is why people say when you're out in nature, it's part of that whole process. It's almost like there's an energetic field that's going through, that's going like, okay, I'm connected. So therefore you're releasing it. But that's also part of being present. So it's not about the doing, meaning having an active lifestyle. It's about the energy that we get from the doing. So in other words, being. When we're, let's say you're just walking, right? Walking is just walking. But when you're not, your attention is drawn to it. Where is your attention at? Right here. And we know that when you have a thought, it can become emotions. And when it becomes emotion, it goes back into the body as well. Emotions are tied to the body. There's a reason why water and earth are separate, are opposite elements, because they're actually the same thing. Two sides of the same coin. Life and death, two sides, same thing. The body. Okay, emotions. But emotions is the air, or the thoughts that have brought out the physical, the material world into like an attachment. So when the thought has started to believe that it's like, oh, okay, it must be this, and it becomes analytical. And so do you see what I mean? I don't know if this really makes sense, but I don't know how to put it in words right now. But yeah, and there's a reason why also air is in the opposite, as an opposite element of fire, right? Because you have all this inspiration, you have this belief, right? It ties in to air, but also reason why when you have belief and it becomes solidified, earth, and then earth becomes analyzed, and kind of like this repeating thing, and then thoughts repeat themselves, get lodged in and becomes more kind of like solidified or liquefied into emotions, and then back around. There's a rebirth through fire. So those are the things about the elements thing. So I'll try to put in a link here, wherever this is, okay, with the video on the 4 elements, the secrets of the 4 elements, but it does tie into that. But I'm going to go deeper into this and where I feel like the shadow work is definitely, yeah, so there's the two sides to it. There's the sort of up here thinking about it, and there's the physical processing of it. So air, water, air, earth, fire, air. So let's use the elements as analogies here, but also literally, because it does tie in to everything. Everything is tied, everything's connected. Whether we're talking about symbolism or not symbolism, or analogy or anti-analogy, whatever. The point is, it's all connected. So practicing it through the body and practicing it through the actual work itself. So this is why when you're saying meditation, I find it a lot of times when people do meditation, it's almost like, okay, meditation is like this process. I have to do it. Because it's a tool. We're thinking, because it's a tool, I have to work with it. I have to use it. And it's like, well, no, it's not really going to make it really work, to be honest. Because in my opinion, meditation is not the tool. Meditation is a tool, meaning it's a label behind it. So we get latched into that. Like, it's like kind of like going to class. I have to learn. The only way I learn is to go here. The only way I believe is to go to church. The only way I need to eat is to be on the dining table. The only way I'm going to love is to have a relationship. It's like labels. But again, there's a process to that. You can't understand non-labels without going through labels. Light, dark, evil, good, shit, whatever. Okay, so the point is that there's always a polarity, especially in the form. So that one, working with that, finding gifts in everything. A simple one is like when you point your finger. Every time you point your finger at something, bring that back to yourself and say, well, okay, well, what can I see in that? So if you see this one's a big one. What if you see someone as a rapist? What if you see someone as a pedophile? Right away, there's projection right away, right? And again, it's not to say that what they're doing is right or rather beneficial, the energy that they're doing is they're disempowering other people by taking away that power, because they themselves don't have power. Or they believe that they don't have power, so they have to seek it elsewhere. It's very Plutonian, right? So they seek it and they find, okay, whoa, okay. So they abuse younger children for pedophiles, they rape, they abuse people in general, could be women, children, could be other males, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it is, okay? It's disempowerment, because we are, it's like, it's a narcissistic, it's very similar to the narcissistic energy. You have been disconnected from that energy, from power, true power, and therefore you suck the power of that stuff. What else can you do? If you don't have life in yourself, but you want life, see, there's that thing, right? Everything wants life. Everything wants to survive. But that's the ego's other purpose, is to, okay, I have this, I have no life, meaning I have no sense of, like, because it believes that life itself is it believes that life is outside of itself. It believes that life has to be given to it rather than embracing it. And that's the connection. That's where the connection is. You are life, and as Eckhart Tolle says, you are life. You are not your life situations. You are life itself. In other words, you are the being. You are the existence itself. You are the intelligence that forms and creates and forms and creates and dies and creates and lives and dies and all those things. The form is not the thing. The form is part of the doing. The form is part of the goal-oriented stuff, the goals, the outcome, the labels, all those things. But we cannot do it. You cannot understand the vertical. You can't bring it in without the horizontal. You cannot have a sky without realizing that you're on the plane, on this earth. How do you know what a sky is until you know what this is right here? Same thing. So that's the shadow work. So when you're pointing a finger at someone, make sure you find the gifts behind that. But another process to that, finding gifts in other people, or it's in other people, but when you project, and is see that it's like, okay, well, if you project it, it's like, oh, that person. What happens right away when you see, oh, pedophiles? What happens right away? We say, oh, they're monsters. You go back to yourself and you say to yourself, oh, I'm a monster. Hard to take. It's a hard pill to swallow. But when you look at that and you say, it's a hard pill to swallow. Okay, well, what's a monster? What is a monster? What are the gifts behind me? Sometimes people wonder, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't be a monster. I don't want to be a monster. So that's more of the rejection part right there. But try to embrace it and meditate on it. In this case, the tool of meditation, meaning the doing of meditation, might help a little bit in this regard. But it's really, for me, I would say your own inner monster is the one that wants to connect, the one that wants to be real, the one that is angry because it has been neglected, the one that has been disempowered. Now we go back into this empowerment thing. So we need to own back that power. So if you yourself had areas in your life or times in your life where you felt disempowered, when you gave in and gave over to someone else's opinion about you, or rather about your process or what you're going through, because all you wanted to do was just enjoy things. Like, for example, it's like, when someone is greedy, for example. This was in one of the videos that they posted, that they had for promoting this, not this book, the Shadow Effect. It was like a combination of Deepak Chopra, Debbie Ford, and Marianne Williamson. Great video. But anyways, the book is great too. But this one goes deeper into it. The Dark Side of the Light Chasers is one. So, what was I saying? Okay, so when we look at that and you say we're greedy, when you look at someone, instead of saying that person is greedy, you say that's greedy. Okay, well, isn't greedy similar to abundance? Take time to process that. See, which ties back into why it's not about meditation. It's not just about the doing of meditation. It's not about the method or the outcome of meditation, or the responsibility or the necessity or the obligation or the routine of meditation. This is why Eckhart puts it this way. He says, every single movement you do, even Thich Tan Han, the Buddhist monk, he said, it's in the breath, it's in the moment. Why do we do that? Because when we're present, we're detaching ourselves from the form and becoming more of the awareness above it. And awareness above it meaning that when you become the awareness above it, it's not just the awareness, you start to realize that it's like, oh, there's that intelligence. Oh. And it comes through, it's actually like, it's evidential, yes, it's evidential in the 3D form when you allow things to happen. Not to say you'll be passive or anything, it's really about, let's say you have a wound, right? If you try to control it, what happens? What happens to a wound when you try to fix it? You kind of get irritated about it, and then then you pick at the scab, and then it leaves a bigger mark than it's supposed to. Right? What happens when you have a zit? You pick at it instead of letting it happen naturally. I'm not talking about, again, this is not about passivity. This is not about being passive. This is about the body, through the body specifically, is the intelligence itself, this inner intelligence, inner wisdom that is in everything. There's a difference between having the wisdom to not do to let things be versus the carelessness or this apathy with doing nothing. You know what I mean? Because when you're guided, when you listen to inner intelligence or that inner wisdom, you realize that it's like, oh, you know when to act. You'll know when to do something. You'll know when things come through. You'll know when you get inspired. You'll know when you get ideas. You know, right? So, I mean, for me personally, yes, I've always said this a lot in some of my videos, maybe a lot, that when I do the Wim Hof method, it's not about the method. I've learned to surrender through the cold, and it's become this teacher of like, it helps me to surrender. It helps me to just be present. And it's helped me a lot to really understand physically, okay? This is why I mentioned earlier about the shadow work being both something around here, mentally, fire, air, and also physically. You know, you need to work on it to release it physically, physiologically, physically, somehow. But through me, it's just through the shadow, through the Wim Hof method, through the breathing first, and then the breathing helps with getting used to and training your body to recognize and also be used to the traumatic feelings, the shock itself, through the cold water. Right, so, and it's been done for like centuries, in different cultures. In Russia, they do it all the time. They go to hot, they do warm showers, and they go to cold, or it's like a shock. But they get used to it. Right, so we get kind of like, we always like to go into the fear thing, and that's okay. The fear will tell you that eventually you'll get sick and tired of it. There's this one video I saw of Eckhart Tolle where he says, like, when we're not ready, it's just that we're not ready. But sometimes when we're not ready, and it's kind of this repeated thing of I'm not being ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, that will also push you in the same direction as like, oh I need to be ready. Right, so that's what fear does as well. Fear is a tool to help us to get away from itself. Fear is telling us, you want me, 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 and all of a sudden, no. It's like this, not like you're fearing fear. It's kind of just like, okay, I've had enough. Okay, got it. Stop it. And then it's no longer comfortable. It's no longer, not even comfortable. It's no longer aligned. It doesn't make us feel aligned their true self. And therefore, because we all have that intuition and instinct to go into that inner intelligence, that inner wisdom. So shadow work is that stuff, like finding the gifts and many things, and going deeper. But it goes through the process, through the body, just like it does through the mind. Cannot go the other way. In fact, it's probably not stronger through the body, because when we release it through the body, we eventually, and we find ways to go and bring our attention to the body, whether it's yoga, some sort of exercise, but specifically through something more ancient than just exercise, meaning more primordial, which is cold, extremes. When you have extremes, and this is very Plutonian, you get that shock, and you have, sometimes you have no choice but to give in, to surrender. You really have to. But for many people, they don't know how to surrender because they haven't experienced that much of a trauma. Yes, there's a pandemic, but I feel like there's still a lot of people out there who just like, okay, they haven't really realized it yet. Unless they already have, and that's fine. That's a good thing, because that means it's like, okay, right? They're healing, they're processing, they're reconnecting, they're realigning themselves. So there's that inner intelligence that comes through when we're present, and I would say from my experience, it's stronger through the body. What else was that? Okay, so how it ties into astrology? That wasn't, well, okay, anyways, that was that. So if we look at all the signs in astrology, if we were looking at our own chart and we get analytical about it, remember again, just because you get analytical about it does not mean it's going to heal you. Is that just because you get objective about it through astrology and you get the information about it, it's not going to go through it. There's no better experience. There's no better substitute than experience. Even Einstein said, knowledge is not understanding. Something like that, right? It's through the body. It's through hands-on right away from the very get-go. Okay, so so we have, let's go with the first house. I'm going to use my chart as an example. Let's go with Leo. So let's say Leo right here, so the signs specifically, so the Leo. What is Leo, right? It's the sun, it's Leo, it's the fifth house, it's about childlikeness and all that stuff. When we start to do things, that Leo energy where we're kind of joyful and happy about something, and then we see someone else who's like too serious, that's a projection. Someone who's the opposite, someone who's like Aquarius, it actually shows up in the opposite signs. Meaning if we're too serious, if we're too analytical, if we're not trusting our intuition, if we're not connected, if we're not joyful, if we're not, we see the opposite of that and say, okay, well, you're so Aquarian, you're so like serious, you're so distant, you're so cold, you're not you're not heartwarming, you're not there, you're not full of joy, you're just bleh, right? That's a projection. But what is the gift behind all that? You look at it and answer it yourself. Everything is going to be slightly different from each person's perspective because it's your own journey. It's also part of what your chart is probably going to show you, reveal about yourself and your journey in this lifetime, your soul contract. So when you have Leo and you have the opposing thing about Aquarius, and you go, okay, they're too serious, you find the gifts in that and you say, okay, well, what then that means being committed, being, really like okay, being in charge. And this is where Leo starts to mature. This energy in yourself, your inner Leo starts to mature. Your becomes more like, instead of being the child, you become more like, you're spreading the child around, and you're spreading that joy around, and then shining, and then becoming this symbol, so to speak, of spreading joy and lightness and ease as well. Leos don't really like working out, but but there could be good things about that too. You start to realize, okay, I can have a bit of discipline when I need to. I can have a bit of analyticalness if I need to kind of watch out and kind of put up a bit of boundaries when I need to, because to watch that, I don't want to be an unhealthy ego. I want to develop a healthy ego. So there you go. And then revert that and say, okay, well, I want to gain my healthy ego. As an adult, you would probably say that and say, okay, well, I don't want to be too analytical. I don't want to be too, okay, that's totally fine. So I embrace that and say, okay, I get why they get too serious. Okay, because so the seriousness you reword what you get in your head. You try to use like what do you call those? a word web or something, and you try and look for things that are the good things that you find, the gifts behind the word similar to that. Right? You look at the word, the first word that comes up, and you say, oh, they're serious. And you write the next word behind that. What is the gift? What benefits can there be behind the word serious? Committed, loyal, which is part of Leo as well. Right? So you have yeah, I do get loyal. Oh my goodness. And you keep going, right? Of course, that may lead to maybe you becoming too analytical. You don't want just enough to kind of give you, okay. Usually it's a little bit more instinctive and intuitive to figure out what the gifts are behind that word that you use to judge the other person. Vice versa too, when you're judging yourself. Oh, I'm not pretty enough. And it's like, so ugly. What is the gift of ugly? It means that you are free-spirited. It means that you are trusting. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I'm ugly. Meaning like, oh, I like the dirt. I'm connected with the earth. I'm connected with more natural things. I take care of my body a little bit more. Right? I have these wrinkles, and that means wisdom. That represents wisdom. See, there's so many more things you can get out of it. So those things, instead of like, yeah. So revert judgment into even that self. Like when you look at someone, oh, he's so judgmental. What does judgmental have to do with anything? Like what is the gift behind being judgmental? They probably are okay, so they're judgmental, so they have an opinion. That means they're confident about themselves. Oh, confidence. Oh, okay. Assuredness, certainty. Oh, wow. Okay, wonderful things you can find in yourself. Okay, well, I have those too. Or someone the opposite. Again, the opposite is like if you're someone who's like so sure of themselves. Now you go into the positive and you admire or idolize someone who's so sure of themselves. What's the gift behind that? How can you find that in yourself? If you look back into your timeline, your past in this life, it's like, when was I sure of myself? When I was a kid. When I get inspired, when I'm committed to something, when I'm actually doing something that I love. It could be anything. It could be something, whether someone judges you for it. It could be a video game. It could be something fun you're doing, or it could be something completely boring and mundane to other people. Okay, so are you committed? Okay, so I am. What do you call it? What was that? I have been. They're so sure of themselves, but I have so sure of myself when I get into this stuff because I enjoy it. So assuredness has a direct correlation with enjoyment, the joy, having fun. Right? Isn't that what it is? So you'll see it in the opposite signs. Whatever the energy is, go with that energy. Use a tool. I use meditation as a tool. Make it a tool. Fine, that's fine. But that's for another time. Once meditation has become an actual lifestyle, meaning like it's part of your everyday action. It's like you're just present. It's not about meditation. It's presence. Then you start to realize, like, okay, guidance comes through, and you get all these ideas. And if it doesn't, that's another sign. That's fine. Right? So, right, it's in the opposites, right? So, at least with the chart, even with the fifth, even with the houses, it works because you have polarities, right? With the sun or with like any of the planets, you do the same thing, right? You look into that and you look at the word and you see sun. Okay, so sun. Okay, let's go somewhere. Let's go to Pluto. Let's say we're looking at Pluto, and you project onto someone. Like, so you embrace your dark side. You embrace your you start to embrace your trauma, and you start to go like, okay, so I'm powerful. That's one of the things about Pluto. It's like people feel powerful. People feel like there's a bit of a sort of a feeling of pride that comes through, especially if you have the Pluto Sun connection there. And you feel kind of proud of yourself and going, okay, I can control things. I have power. I'm tenacious. I last a long time. I'm very patient. I'm like eternally patient. I'm, what do you call this? I heal I regenerate quickly. I know how to regenerate. I know how to create thick ass boundaries, like thick ass fucking boundaries. For me, that's myself. And when you look at someone who's vulnerable, the opposite of that, or powerless, vulnerable, that can happen. I've done that before. I projected onto other people and going, nah. But what is the gift behind that? If you're powerless, that means you're courageous enough to give over and trust. You're trusting and you're allowing yourself to be, and saying, okay, that's a gift about being passive, right? Even if I said earlier, one of the words that I said earlier, I realized I said, oh, this is not about being passive. Like, well, in itself, being passive has a gift. When you look for those things in every little thing, that those doors, that they said, the analogy used in this book, the doors start to open up again, right? You start to open up again. And you start to really dig deep and like, okay, wow, okay? And you project less onto people. And you start to go, okay, right? So it could be anything and everything. Anything that you have a kind of an emotional reaction to. You feel kind of like, you get affected by it on an emotional level. Even if it's like right here. You start to go like, and then you create judgments in your head. Only you know when you are projecting. Mentally, instinctively, intuitively, physically. You know the energy is right there. You'll know. And you just trust that. What will heighten it for sure is definitely like the physical work that will help with shadow work, which is doing what you can to bring yourself into the moment. Surrender to the moment. Again, I suggest Wim Hof method, or don't just do cold showers because you want to train your body. So when I say Wim Hof method, again, it's not about the method, but it could be about the method. Again, that's fine. Methodology has its purpose. Being linked and being attached to method is fine because it helps you structure. It helps you, it gives you this sort of like, okay. See, again, right there. Finding the shadow, finding the gift in that shadow. And it's like, okay, that's okay. People can be pedantic, technical. People can be routine, focus on routine. That's totally fine. Right? If it's not something that you are comfortable with, that's totally fine. Right? You don't need to project onto other people what they're doing. And it's part of the shadow work process as well. Again, it's beyond the mind, beyond the analysis, beyond the thoughts and all those things. It has to be through the body. It's stronger through the body and you start to accept it even more. So it's a beautiful thing. The other thing is, I think that's it. So I hope that helps. It was more about shadow work than it was about astrology, but everything is connected anyways. So on that note, I'll take a moment here to just be present. Really surrender to the moment. Thoughts that come through. Bring your attention to the whole body. You can start with, of course, your skin. What are you feeling? Fingers. The vibration. If you're talking, the vibration in your throat. Attention to the horizontal so that the vertical can come through, that you're connected. And remember that you can always make it a practice. Maybe you don't necessarily have to or need to or whatever to do any of the cold shower or the Wim Hof method, the breathing, then the cold shower. You choose. But you can make it a practice to just, every time you slow down, it triggers being present to a certain degree. It triggers release, allows you to surrender, and that you're always okay. I hope you make it a practice. I hope this helps. And I hope to see you guys later. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.